looking at the aspect of urbanization, very well knowing that in our prior discussions, we attributed urbanization to the mere fact that it is actually as a result of a growing population in the urban areas. We today want to look at another aspect of demography, specifically the component of population distribution. And when we're referring to population distribution, most times we are looking at how the population is located across a given area. So it is the number of people in a particular space, or sometimes we refer to acre, per kilometer and so forth. So we want to understand what some of the factors are that affect how people are distributed. Why we want to look at it at this point is because when you're able to look at these factors, then you will be able to understand why actually more people go to the urban areas, or why urbanization occurs. So if you're able to understand factors that help people to be distributed more at a certain spot compared to in the other spot, then it gives you a broad idea of why some of the cities are actually growing very fast, and you're able to relate it to this aspect of population distribution. So the first factor we want to look at is the climate. And here, when we're referring to climate, we're referring to a favorable climate condition in terms of warm, moderate, meaning lead to a higher population density compared to a harsh climate condition, such as extreme coldness and extreme hotness conditions, meaning people will stay more in places where the conditions are favorable for them. They will also look at, in terms of another physical aspect, areas are more densely populated than in fertile soil areas. But also we have vegetation. We shall have a very dense forest can discourage settlement, while sparse vegetation may be easier to farm and live in. So we shall have people going more into places where there is sparse vegetation than where there is a very dense forest. That is why you see people moving away from places that they call inhabitable. Then we look at another factor as the relief, where flat plains and the plateaus tend to have higher density than mountainous areas. So we have people who tend to live more. People are attracted more where the surfaces are flat compared to where the places are extremely mountainous. And I think we're able to explore that when we're looking at the way people settle in our communities. You'll realize that there are more people who are settling in places that are flat surfaced than those that are in the mountainous areas, where there is reliable freshwater supply, such as rivers, lakes. It attracts more people because of the aspect of agriculture, but also because of the aspect of industry and living. So people would prefer to stay where there is reliable fresh waters, and then where there is no water source. But also mineral resources, areas with valuable minerals tend to be more populated.
Excuse me, sir, may you please share me with you the screen? I cannot see what you're presenting.
Other people are able to see, I think. probably your network might be a little slow.
Yeah,
So you
I'm able to see.
yeah, your network might be a little slow, so you have to wait for it to load first. Then you're able to see. Unless it persists, but I think everyone is able to see. So when we're looking at the mineral resources, you're able to realize that where people find that there are minerals such as oil, you realize that people tend to be staying more where the oil discoveries are compared to those places that do not have mineral. So after the physical factors, we also want to look at what we call the human factors. And in our reference to the human factors, we're looking at the historical factors such as past events like wars or cultural factors can influence the current distribution. So probably if you're to look at experiences of historical factors, we may talk about wars, but we can even look at other issues such as natural disasters, probably issues such as landslides or floods. When such historical factors have been identified, for example, on the Nile River, it is well known that between the months of August or when the rains fall, the Nile River is always flooded. So you'll realize that when that particular period reaches, people move away from the rivers or move away from the banks of the rivers and go and settle in another place. But also, when we're referring to issues like wars, you'll realize that because wars or instability took place at a certain place, that place will have a lower density of the population compared to other places that predominantly stable. Then we look at also the economic factors, areas with strong economic areas with strong economies, but also diverse industries and good infrastructure have higher density. Subsistence farming areas tend to be less populated. So because subsistence means that you're farming for your home consumption. So sometimes you will need space for you to be able to farm. However, this particular factor of economic factors rightly gives us the reason as to why you see people moving more to the urban areas where there are better economic opportunities. So people would expect that because of the diversity or the number of industries that are in the urban economy, they are able to move in there and be able to, the chances that they will be able to get job opportunities is higher compared to when they are in their rural areas. But also political factors play a very big role in affecting population distribution, and we are referring to government policies that can influence population distribution, such as moving people to develop new areas, but also political stability can attract more people. So you realize that if politically a country is stable, people would admire to move more into that particular country, or many more people would admire to go to that particular country. But also government through policies, politicians through policies can be able to influence how distributions are done. For example, policies such as those that bar people from staying where the river sources are, but also they can bar people from staying where the wetlands are. So some of these policies, such as even relocating people from areas of immense congestion to areas where people are less. So that is how politically population distribution can be influenced in that regard. Then when we look at other social factors, issues such as traditions and beliefs can influence birth rates and migration patterns. So we understand that traditionally there are different beliefs regarding the births. So, for example, in the African context, or in most of the African traditions, children are taken as replacement. The children are known for the replacement method, but also children are seen as a sign of continuity of the tradition, and therefore parents or young people are encouraged to have as many children as possible. So this therefore has a very huge influence on the birth rates, but also it has a very huge tradition has a very huge impact on migration patterns, and therefore tradition beliefs such as on pastoralist communities helps in making migration patterns more complex. Why? Because the attribution that this particular tradition means that people are able to move from one place to another because they consider livestock as the whole their whole proper plan for existence, or their whole idea for existence, and therefore they attach so much value to that particular livestock, and therefore they can be able to move to any other place, thus influencing their population distribution. But also communication affects population distribution. Good transport networks or road railways encourage development and higher density, whereas remote areas with poor transport have lower density. So this is very common. You realize that people tend to move and settle where it is easier to communicate. People tend to settle where the roads are, where the railways are, where it is easily accessible, than where the transport systems are very poor. Then we also talk about resources. Here, in anything in the environment useful to the humans. So where people are able to see resources, they can be able to be attracted. And when we're referring to resources, we are meaning anything that is useful to a human being. And some of these resources include natural resources that are provided by nature but not by humans, such as renewable energy, such as water, forests, non-renewable, such as minerals and fossil fuels. So these are resources that keep attracting mankind to those specific places. But also we have human resources such as the skills and abilities of people, crucial for using natural resources effectively. So people would want to stay where there is labor, but also you realize that industries would prefer to go where they can have labor. And therefore, these all affect population distribution. Then we also have an issue on the resource distribution issues. The challenge with the resource distribution is that there is most often an even distribution across the country. You realize that there are certain states or there are certain provinces where they do not benefit because the resources are not evenly distributed across the country, and therefore it has a very huge impact on how people settle. So you might realize that there are more people settling at a different at a different location of the country. Probably if the country is divided into, let's say, northeast or northeast, west, and central, then you would have if your resources are more inclined to the east, then you would have more people settling in the east compared to those that are settling in other parts of the country. Then you have overexploitation that can damage the environment. We also have difficulty accessing some resources. So these are some of the issues or some of the challenges regarding the distribution. In other words, there are parts, regarding resource distribution. So you realize that because of these resources that are there, sometimes it leads to overexploitation and damage of the environment, but as well as the difficulty accessing some resources in there. So we're not saying the uneven distribution across the country affecting, but we're just raising the issue of resource distribution, and we're raising some of the challenges associated with it. Then we have the potential for resource-based conflicts, which we are seeing mainly. We can gladly cite the example of Libya. Due to the oil, we were able to see conflicts arising in the country because of the gold. But also we have different other countries that have suffered resource-based conflicts as a result of those natural resources, such as uranium. We have fuel, we have coal, we have gold, and so forth. Even in our neighborhood in the eastern DRC, we're having conflicts arising as a result of the resource-based conflicts because of the gold that is in the Congo, in the eastern part of Congo. So we're seeing these issues arise. But also the exploitation of developing nations' resources by richer countries. And this is often where we're seeing that the Western countries mostly are coming in to exploit resources from the developing world. But also we're seeing an environmental degradation due to resource overexploitation, which we looked at. So we just want to look at how the non-governmental organizations fill development gaps in poor countries. And we will just run through them very quickly in there. So they offer support to small farmers through loans and trainings. They do research and project evaluations. They provide public education on government programs. They also do advocacy for poor and social justice. They do conflict resolutions and peace building. The social activism and disaster relief. So you're able to see that the non-government organizations offer a lot in trying to fill the development gaps in poor countries. So transformation here, and when we look at rural to urban transformation, we're saying that rural landscapes are changing as they develop or become peri-urban areas. This merging of rural and urban areas is called urbanization. So you're seeing what we call intermediate towns. For example, this place was necessarily a rural area, but as a result of very many different factors, we start to see these rural areas develop into small and mid-sized towns, which we normally refer to as trading centers. Then from a trading center, probably that process is what we call urbanization, but also refer to as a backed up experiment. So a backed up change that occurs. So in other words, there is a global backed up change that is occurring on urbanization, and that is why we're saying that the rural areas it's happening worldwide. So worldwide, we're seeing the rates of urbanization increasing. In other words, rural areas becoming more becoming more of an urban area, increasing. So, what are some of the impacts of that on rural communities? What is the impact of what we're looking at here? Rural to urban transformation and global phenomenon on rural communities. One is that there is reduced isolation, that rural people gain greater access to public services and new ideas as a result of those issues that are arising. Then the rural areas also have what we call the social changes that are occurring, new social actors, elites, and collaborations emerge. And this is where I want us to pay very keen attention. And it is the question that I was asking the other time, that for you as a student of demography, but also as a planner, for you need to look at what is the impact of these issues on rural communities. If we are referring to issues of social changes, you should be able to look at the social structures themselves and how they are subsequently changing. So if you look at new social actors, then you should be able to subject issues of new social actors on their greater impact on demography, especially on the composition of the population, on the distribution of the population, but also on issues of mobility, on issues of morbidity, on issues of mortality. You should be able to broadly explore the key impacts we have mentioned here onto those. We should be able to subject it onto those particular issues in there. So if we have new social actors, does it mean that there is an improvement on the uptake of reproductive health services? Or if we are having new social actors, we could be having more religions coming in as a result of urbanization. So if we're having more religions in the population, you should be able to attribute, you should be able to understand the relationship between having people have different beliefs, apart from the traditional religions that have existed before, vis-a-vis the uptake of certain reproductive health services. You might realize that there is an increase in the uptake of those services. Partly why? Because our traditional religions probably have a more conservative theology, or they are more conservative regarding issues of uptake of certain reproductive health services, such as family planning. But also, if you realize that the social actors are becoming negative, you might realize that that particular society has been influenced by religions that do not probably encourage their followers probably to have institutional deliveries. So if you're able to understand the trend that is happening in your community in terms of seeking healthcare, then you should be able to attribute it to some of the social factors that are occurring. The moment you see that your society is starting to urbanize, you must be able to know that some of these issues are starting to come in. And if you assess your trend of key performance indicators in health, such as immunization rate, such as maternal child health care, such as gender-based violences, and if you realize that some of these things are starting to increase negatively or decrease in negatives, then you should be able to question some of those issues. Thirdly is what we call increased interaction that occurs. Communication and exchange between rural and urban populations become more frequent. So that means that if the interactions are becoming more frequent, it also poses an impact, or it has an effect on some of these issues that I have just been referring to. So it means that there is more exchange between rural and urban, and therefore there are different characteristics that exist in both, and therefore the ideas that both are sharing might vary. And as a result, you can be able to see just from the fashion industry how urban behaviors shift to the rural areas. If you look at your fashion industry, you would be able to see how certain fashions of how clothes were made or how people dressed, how they engulfed the village. You would realize they started from an urban setting and they trickled down to the village. So that is similar also how reproductive health behaviors and different health-seeking behaviors and other public health issues can be able to trickle down, and also even social factors, religious factors, and other traditions can be able to trickle in from up there down to the rural areas. So regional development is another in terms of the impact. We're saying that urbanization drives advancement in rural areas through improved agricultural productivity, increased capital investment, but also strong agricultural organizations. So you should be able to relate issues of improved agricultural productivity to how people are able to feed, and how people are able to feed can be able to help you assess the nutrition level. And if you're able to assess the nutritional level of a community, then you should be able to subject agriculture into economic terms. And if there is improved productivity of agriculture, then and people's incomes are becoming higher, then there are chances that utilization of reproductive health services is much higher because of the correlation, meaning that people can be able to afford certain services, but also transport for certain services can be afforded, but also people can be able to get information probably because of their improved productivity. They can be able to access media, they can be able to access televisions and so forth. So the information flow becomes easier, and all these can be able to be attributed to improving sexual reproductive health. But also, when you're looking at this entire cost unit of urbanization, you should be able to look at communities that are marginalized, or you should be able to look at some aspects specifically. For example, you should be able to look at females, you should be able to look at young boys, you should be able to look at young girls, you should be able to look at teenagers, adolescents, you should be able to look at boys who are not in school, girls who are not in school. So out of school people, you should be able to look at them. So you need to look at the impact not on a generalized way, because there are specific groups in the population that are affected by certain specific issues in there. So it is all about you to be able to exploit some of those areas in there. Then the document emphasizes the interconnectedness of the rural and urban areas, and that is why we are looking at how urban areas affect rural areas vis-a-vis how actually also rural areas are able to affect urban areas. So here we want to understand the interconnectedness. How are they related? And firstly, we are saying they have economic links because the urbanization creates economic opportunities for both regions, whereas the rural people intend to go and seek employment opportunities. The other side, the urban area is looking for workforce, labor force. They are looking at raw materials in the other side. So those are some of the different issues regarding economic link. But also we have social ties, and we're saying that the interactions and the exchanges between rural and urban populations increase as a result of the social ties. That is why they are interconnected. So we shall have more interaction between rural and urban populations, but also vice versa in that in that particular aspect. And we already discussed how the different interactions can occur. Then we're also looking at the environmental impact because urbanization can have both positive and negative environmental consequences for the rural areas. That is how interconnected they are in terms of how the urban areas are able to utilize the resources in the rural areas. It might have a consequence which might be positive in a way that as urbanization develops or as urbanization takes place, you realize that they start to take more measures regarding protection of the environment against issues such as plastics and so forth. So that might have a positive impact on that. So we want to look at what rural policies are because we're looking at a process through which rural development occurs. So we want to just highlight quickly what rural policies are. We want to look at key areas of focus on rural development. Then we look at some of the approaches of rural development. And yes, we would be able to be good to end with rural development. So rural policies are government strategies designed to improve the living conditions of people in rural areas. So these policies address various sectors such as education, employment, agriculture, infrastructure, healthcare, and environment. Their overall goal is to achieve sustainability, and we are just like we've looked at different policies, we are referring to these ones again as a strategy by government to improve the living conditions of people in the rural setting. So key areas of focus in the rural development is that government or partners need to do human resource development. We intend to do agricultural development, and there's also need to do infrastructure development. And when we're referring to the human resource development, we mean that this includes the skill training programs to improve employability, that you need to offer the rural people skills that are marketable, but also that can improve the rate at which the rural people can be employed, and it can support entrepreneurship. But also through agricultural development, government intends to, through rural policies, to modernize farming practices and increase productivity from the whole production to probably the use of caterpillars, tractors, the use of ox plows, the use of fertilizers, and so forth as a way of agricultural development. So government has specific policies that target that particular issue of agricultural development. But also issues such as infrastructure development involving building of roads, road transport network, and better communication systems, all in the aim of improving or looking at rural development. Then we look at social development so that there is improvement of education, access to healthcare, and social amenities. And this can be done through outreaches, empowering of the healthcare system, among other policies that are developed including the public health policies that help government to manage social development. There are also policies such as a school per village or a school per sub-county, probably a secondary school per sub-county. These are all some of the policies government can use in order to have rural development. Then environmental protection, we have sustainable practices are encouraged to conserve natural resources and mitigate environmental degradation. We've seen issues of waste management. We've seen issues of control of tree cutting in the rural areas, all aimed at the environmental protection. So we also want to look at the approaches to rural development as we're running short of time, but I want to just summarize it quickly here and mainly look at the integrated rural development as an approach where we want to involve the central government, we want to involve the department, various initiatives like skill development, agriculture, non-farm activities, promoting a holistic way to end poverty. In other words, when we're referring to integrated, we are looking at how government departments should be able to holistically handle this issue. So if you're looking at skill development, you should also look at agriculture, you should also look at non-farm activities. So there is a whole holistic way through which this should be done. In other words, that's why we're using the word integrated, meaning we are doing, we are putting together different approaches. But also we have the multi-sectoral approach, which recognizes the need and the importance of sectors beyond agriculture, such as health, education, and other sectors to help in the comprehensive rural growth. So what happens is that you need to involve these other sectors if you want to have rural development. Then you should be able to improve your healthcare, not only your healthcare, your agriculture, not only your agriculture, your trade, your economics. You should be able to look at your wash or your transportation. So you have to have that multi-sectoral approach in order to do that. Then we have the area development approach that targets specific regions rather than sectors or people groups. Although specific groups may benefit within the broader strategy, but the area development approach, in other words, means that you first target a specific geographical region with your approach to develop. So if you wanted to develop this particular province, you first start with this particular province, then you're able to go and look at another. But in other words, you might also look at a specific group. For example, in a country that has a lot of young people who are probably who are designated as youth, you would want to target that specific group of youth towards your development approach. And therefore, that is what that particular area development approach is talking about. Then we have the sectoral development approach that focuses on the intensive development within a particular sector. So if we wanted to look at agriculture itself, then we would have a very comprehensive development of our agricultural systems. Then we go, if we want to target the education, we would have a very comprehensive development of our education system in the rural setting. And then that is how we can be able to have a rural development. Then we have the industrial development approach that looks at promoting rural industrialization to create jobs and boost the economy. meaning that primarily looks at setting up industries and setting up factories in the rural area so that it can create employment opportunities for the rural people, and then the development can start to take place in that particular rural area. So in other words, that industrial development approach looks at industrialization as the key to rural development. Then the last two approaches, one is that there is public-private partnership, and when we're looking at the public-private partnership, like we had discussed earlier on, it encourages collaboration between government and private entities to invest in the rural amenities and reduce government burden. So the private sector can be able to, for example, if government is offering healthcare services in the rural areas, the private sector can as well go and construct health facilities where they are able to probably charge a little amount, and all those are as a result of the public-private partnership. In other words, government can as well offer them free drugs in those private health facilities, and those particular free drugs will be distributed to those who come to the health facilities free of charge. So those are some of the public-private partnership deals that can help in the rural development approach. And lastly is what we have, the rural planning, which emphasizes a well-planned and executed short-term and long-term strategy to address rural challenges. So this involves the relevant authorities coming up with what they intend to achieve, but also how they intend to with a very detailed plan on how they intend to have a rural area develop to a better or to an urban area. So that means they lay down their plans, and then these plans can be executed, and we'll be able to achieve the rural development. So those are the issues I wanted to quickly run through, and I think our time is up for that particular discussion. So probably Samuel can have his recording off, and then we are able to ask a few questions where I can be able to elaborate on what we were unable to get. But as well, we can have contributions, we can have comments, and then we're able to end our session for today. Yes. Do we have any questions regarding what I have presented? I'm only seeing people leaving the meeting. Do you have any comments, or do you have any questions or any other clarification away from the recording that you would want us to elaborate more on? Then kindly you can raise up your hand, or you can unmute and say what you want to say, and then we close for today. Yes, James. James, go on. Lorot, you can unmute and talk. Your hand is up.
Okay, I think maybe he's not getting you, or what, is he not communicating? But I think the last part I got it, but from the beginning, the internet, I was having challenge with the internet. That's why from my side, I joined a bit late. But the last part, I picked it. I picked something.
Okay, I think